Why was everyone watching her like she didn't belong? The heavy oak door of Hulbeck swung inward with a groan, letting in a gust of cool night air that cut through the warmth of spilled whiskey and low conversation. A dozen pairs of eyes turned briefly toward the newcomer, a woman in a weathered leather jacket, her boots darkened by the rain, her posture composed and deliberate. She scanned the room with a glance that seemed casual but wasn't. It was measured, methodical, counting exits, assessing threats, evaluating distance. To most, it was just a habit. To Lissa Vaughn, it was survival. She crossed the room without a word, her movements fluid and efficient, the kind that didn't draw attention but still made those who knew what to look for sit a little straighter. The veterans did. They recognized it, that economy of motion honed by years of training. It wasn't the walk of someone who played at combat. It was the walk of someone who'd lived it. Evening, Larissa. Zephyr's voice came from behind the polished bar. His left sleeve ended in a neat pin at the wrist, the rest of the arm left somewhere in the dirt outside Fallujah. They never spoke much. They didn't have to. He poured a neat whiskey without asking, sliding it across the bar with the kind of silent understanding that existed only between those who had seen too much. The place was more crowded than usual. A group of newly minted officers, their uniforms still stiff and bright from the ceremony, filled the center tables. Their voices carried, loud, enthusiastic, the kind of optimism only those who'd never been shot at could afford. Around them, the older generation sat quietly, drinking and listening, occasionally offering a nod or a half-smile at some story or another. Lissa found a seat at the far end, back to the wall, eyes on both exits. Habit again, always habit. That was when she heard his voice, booming, theatrical, dripping with the kind of confidence that needed an audience to exist. "And that's when I told the ambassador," the man declared, leaning back in his chair as the junior officers hung on every word. "Sir, with all due respect, my Marines aren't here to babysit diplomats." The expected laughter followed. Colonel Abernathy Mercer, retired now, but once a name that carried weight. His chest had been heavy with ribbons back then, it still was tonight, even though he'd pinned them to a civilian blazer. That, more than anything, told Lissa what kind of man he was. She sipped her whiskey and kept listening. At first it was just noise. Stories of glory told a little louder and a little bolder with every drink. But then his gaze shifted. Once, twice. Then it lingered. She could feel it crawling over her, the weight of scrutiny, the prickling irritation of someone's curiosity turning to judgment. "You see that?" he said finally, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Another civilian contractor playing dress-up soldier." A few heads turned. Lissa didn't. "They buy the gear," Mercer went on, gesturing vaguely in her direction. "Learn the lingo, then charge the Pentagon consulting fees for expertise they never earned." Major Thaddeus Irving shifted uncomfortably beside him. The younger officers looked back and forth between the two, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. Zephyr wiped the bar down between them and muttered under his breath, "Ignore him. Third drink always turns him into an ass." But Mercer wasn't done. "These private military consultants," he said, standing now, his voice growing louder, "waltz around secure facilities with their clearances, but half of them have never heard a shot fired in anger." The room quieted. Veterans knew the rhythm of a confrontation when they heard it building. Conversation slowed, glasses lowered. Mercer took his drink and sauntered closer. "You know what gives it away?" he asked, stopping just behind her left shoulder. "The watch, the boots, the way you're sitting right now back to the wall, eyes on the door. You're wearing the costume, but are you the real thing?" Zephyr started to speak, but Mercer cut him off with a raised hand. "I'm having a conversation with the lady." Lissa still hadn't moved. She hadn't spoken a word. Her hand tightened slightly around her glass, the only betrayal of anything beneath the surface. "So," Mercer said, leaning closer, "what's your story? Where'd you serve? What was your call sign? Or did you just buy all this gear online to look the part? Silence fell, complete, heavy. Every eye was on them now. Slowly, deliberately, Lissa rotated her stool to face him. It was the first time their eyes met, and for the first time that evening, Mercer faltered. There was something in her gaze, not anger, not fear, but depth. Depth that didn't belong to someone pretending. "No call sign," he said with a smirk. "That's what I thought." The silence stretched. The bar seemed to hold its breath. Even the hum of the refrigeration units faded into the background. Her voice, when it finally came, was soft, but it carried. "Phantom 7. 2 words." And the room changed. Mercer's glass slipped in his hand, whiskey sloshing over his knuckles as his face drained of color. Major Irving gasped, stepping back like she'd suddenly become something dangerous. Veterans throughout the room shifted, some straightened instinctively, others stood at attention without even realizing they were doing it. The younger officers looked confused, but they didn't need to understand. The reaction of the older men told them enough. Mercer swallowed. "That's not possible." "Phantom 7 was very real, Colonel," came a voice from the corner. The crowd parted slightly as Admiral Silas Thorne rose from his booth. Few had noticed him before, his face lined, his presence quiet, but there was no mistaking the authority in his bearing. Even Mercer snapped to a semblance of attention as the flag officer approached. "Colonel," Thorne said evenly, "I believe you've been addressing one of the most decorated operators in recent military history, though you won't find those decorations in any public record." Recognition dawned across the room like a sunrise, and with it, a quiet respect. Men who had spent decades in uniform stood a little taller. A few saluted. Others simply stared, the weight of what they were seeing dawning slowly but undeniably. Mercer's lips moved soundlessly before words finally came. "I wasn't aware that any Phantom 7 operators were still." "Still breathing," Lissa finished, her voice tinged with dry humor. "Fewer than there should be." The words hit harder than any insult. Whatever Phantom 7 was, it had cost dearly. "Ma'am," Mercer said finally, straightening fully now, his voice steady but stripped of arrogance. "I spoke out of line and without knowledge. I apologize for my conduct." She nodded once but did not return his salute. She wasn't in uniform, and there was no victory in her eyes. Only weariness, the kind that comes from carrying ghosts no one else will ever see. "We're all just trying to enjoy a quiet drink, Colonel." The tension broke slowly like a storm passing. Conversation resumed, though softer now, more respectful. People didn't approach her directly, but they didn't have to. Drinks appeared at her table unasked. Veterans offered nods as they passed. A young lieutenant, Octavia Wren, judging by her name tag, set a fresh drink down in front of her and whispered, "Thank you for your service." It was the simplest gesture of the night. It was also the one that pierced deepest. "Take care of your people, Lieutenant," Lissa said softly. "That's the only thanks any of us need." Hours later, the bar emptied. Rain slicked the parking lot outside. She stepped into the night with the quiet certainty that something had shifted. Recognition never sat well with her. It wasn't why she'd done any of it. But tonight, it reminded her of something she'd spent years trying to forget. And then she saw him. Admiral Thorne waited by a black SUV, hands folded behind his back, the old gravity in his stance undiminished by age. "It was only a matter of time," he said without preamble. "They're eliminating Phantom 7 operators one by one." Lissa didn't flinch. She'd suspected as much. "Dashel, Paraguay last month," she said quietly. "Ara, Geneva last week, both natural causes, too convenient." "You're being watched," Thorne said simply. "Yesterday, I thought I felt eyes on me," she admitted. "Thought maybe I was getting paranoid." "Paranoia kept you alive this long." The rain was heavier now, running off her jacket like tears she'd never allow herself to shed. "They want to bring you in," he continued. Protective custody. A humorless smile touched her lips. We both know there's no protection from this, not even from the inside. Then what's your play? She looked back toward the bar, toward the ghost she'd left behind, and then to the horizon, where a faint gray glow hinted at dawn. Find the remaining team, figure out who's targeting us, and do what Phantom 7 does best. Thorne tilted his head, which is become the nightmare that haunts other people's sleep. She walked into the rain with that promise heavy on her shoulders. Somewhere across the street, a shadow lifted a phone to its lips. Confirmed, the voice said softly. Phantom 7 is active again. The hand hovered over a concealed weapon and hesitated. Not here, not yet. The hunt had begun, and the predator knew it was being hunted. Why did her apartment feel like a stranger's house? The door clicked shut behind her, sealing out the rain and the ghost of whiskey-soaked voices. Yet the silence inside wasn't comforting, it was heavy, watchful, as if the walls themselves were waiting for her next move. Lissa Vaughn stood still in the entryway, letting her eyes travel across the familiar layout. Kitchen to the left, hallway straight ahead, 3 potential hiding spots within her immediate line of sight. None of them were likely compromised. The security system had registered no breaches, but likely had never kept her alive. She moved, slow, deliberate, a room-by-room sweep that had become ritual over the years. Bathroom first, corners clear, mirror intact. Then the bedroom, closet checked, safe untouched. The living room, windows undisturbed, blinds positioned exactly as she'd left them. It wasn't paranoia, it was procedure. Only when every shadow had been cleared did she allow herself to exhale. The habit wasn't born from fear. It was muscle memory, a survival instinct carved into her by decades of missions where one lapse in attention was the difference between coming home and vanishing into a footnote. And tonight, that instinct was screaming that the old life she'd buried wasn't done with her yet. She crossed to the bookshelf and pressed her fingers into the underside of the third shelf. Click. A section of wall swung inward, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, a rugged laptop blinked to life, its unmarked casing giving away nothing about the power it contained. It didn't ask for a password. Phantom 7 didn't use anything so crude. Instead, it scanned her iris, then demanded a secondary biometric confirmation, a unique pressure pattern of her fingertips against the metal casing. The screen unlocked. She typed only 4 words, Ghost Protocol initiated. It was a phrase she hadn't used in over a decade, the emergency code reserved for one purpose, to bring Phantom 7 back from the dead. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, the muscle memory still there after all these years. Dashiell and Ara confirmed down. Rendezvous at Echo Point in 72 hours. The message would bounce through a labyrinth of encrypted relays, some digital, some physical, some intentionally routed through abandoned satellites no agency had bothered to decommission. When it reached its recipients, it would be wiped instantly from existence. No footprints, no trace. She closed the laptop, slid it back into its hiding place, and sealed the wall. Then she crossed the room to the closet, pushed aside a row of innocuous clothes, and keyed in a code on the concealed safe. Inside, a passport under a name that didn't belong to her, credentials meticulously constructed over years for an identity she'd never planned to use, a weapon compact, matte black, modified for operators who could not afford to miss, and a small, weathered photograph. 6 people stood shoulder to shoulder in the image, faces half hidden behind tactical gear. They weren't smiling, Phantom 7 never had reason to, but there was something in their eyes, trust, shared purpose, family in the only form they'd ever known it. She let herself look at it for exactly 30 seconds, not one more. Then she packed, passport, credentials, weapon, a go-bag that had been waiting beneath her bed for this exact moment, always ready, always prepared. The shower was quick, more for discipline than comfort. As steam filled the bathroom, her eyes caught the mirror. The scars across her shoulder and down her back stared back at her, silent testimony to the price she had paid and the ghost she still carried. They were not reminders of weakness. They were evidence of survival. Dressed now in nondescript travel clothes, jeans, a muted blazer, nothing that would draw a second glance, she settled onto the couch. Her weapon rested within reach. Her eyes drifted shut, but she did not sleep. Phantom 7 operators didn't sleep. They slipped into controlled stillness, a resting state that sharpened reflexes and slowed their hearts but never dulled their senses. Dawn bled across the city skyline when her phone buzzed. Unknown number, 2 words, Spectre secure, Wraith secure. 2 teammates alive. That left one unaccounted for, Talon. And if Talon wasn't answering, he was either deep under or already dead. She'd need to find out which before they could regroup. 3 sharp knocks broke the silence, precise, measured, military. Lissa's body reacted before her mind caught up. She moved silently to the door, gun drawn, and peered through the peephole. Lieutenant Octavia Wren. Alone, civilian clothes, no visible weapon. Still, no one should know this address. "I know you're in there." Wren's voice was calm, controlled. "Admiral Thorne sent me. I'm carrying a message that can't be transmitted electronically." The protocol checked out, but trust was a luxury long extinct. Lissa kept the chain engaged and opened the door a few inches. "Cairo goes dark at midnight," Wren said evenly. "He said you'd understand." The code phrase was correct, a reference to an operation no one but Thorne and Phantom 7 could possibly know. Lissa unlatched the chain and stepped aside. Wren entered without hesitation, her gaze scanning the apartment in the same way Lissa had scanned the bar. Not fear, assessment. And in that moment, Lissa's estimation of the young lieutenant shifted slightly. She wasn't just a messenger. She was trained. "I'm also supposed to give you this." Wren produced a small data drive from her pocket. "And to tell you that I've been assigned as your liaison. The Admiral thought you might need someone who can still move through official channels." "Liaison," Lissa repeated, taking the drive without touching Wren's hand. "That's a polite way of saying asset. Are you prepared for what that means, Lieutenant? Because once you step into this shadow, there's no stepping back into the light." Wren's posture didn't waver. "With respect, ma'am, I made my choice when I agreed to deliver that message. Admiral Thorne briefed me on the basics. Former operators being systematically eliminated, highly classified, extreme risk. I understand what I'm signing up for." "No," Lissa said flatly. "You don't, but you will." She gestured toward the couch. "Sit. Tell me exactly what Thorne told you, word for word." Wren obeyed. Her account was crisp, detailed, and as far as Lissa could tell, truthful. If the young officer was lying, she was either extraordinarily skilled or genuinely on their side. "There's one more thing," Wren added when she finished. "Talon made contact 6 hours ago. He's gone to ground in Bucharest after an attempt on his life." Relief flickered across Lissa's face, the first visible emotion since the bar. Talon alive meant they still had a fighting chance. "Why you?" she asked, studying Wren carefully. "What makes you qualified for this?" "My father was General Marcus Wren." The name hit like a ghost from the past. General Wren, the architect behind several classified black programs. Dead 3 years now. "Heart attack," the official report had said. The whispers had told a different story. "He told me," Wren continued, "that if I ever met someone connected to Phantom 7, I should trust them with my life. He said you were the best this country ever produced, and that you were betrayed by the very people you protected." "Your father knew things he shouldn't have known," Lissa said quietly. "That knowledge probably got him killed." "I'm aware," Wren replied. "That's why I volunteered. I want to know who was responsible." Vengeance. The word wasn't spoken, but it hung in the air nonetheless. It wasn't an unfamiliar motivator. In fact, It was one of the most reliable. What's on the drive? Autopsy reports for Dashiell and Ara. Surveillance footage from the 48 hours before their deaths. The Admiral thought it might help identify the perpetrators. Lissa nodded. Then listen carefully. From this moment on, you're operating without official sanction. If we're compromised, the government will disavow you. Best case, your career ends. Worst case, you end up like Dashiell and Ara. I understand. And stop calling me ma'am. It's Lissa. We're not in a chain of command here. Understood. Lissa checked her watch. I have a flight to catch in 3 hours. Go home, pack essentials, settle anything you can't leave behind. Tell no one where you're going or why. From now on, cash only. No electronics, no phones. Wren nodded, committing each instruction to memory. One more thing. Lissa handed her a small device. A panic switch, direct line to Thorn. If you ever think I've been compromised or that I'm not who I say I am, press it. Assume everyone, including me, is hostile until proven otherwise. Wren hesitated only briefly. Will 3 hours be enough for you to verify I'm not a threat? I'll never be completely convinced, Lissa said, and for the first time a hint of grim amusement crossed her lips. That's how I've stayed alive this long. 3 hours later, Zurich International Airport thrummed with movement. Travelers hustled through security lines, luggage wheels clattering against polished floors. Lissa walked among them, just another face in the tide. Wren followed 6 paces behind, their separation precise, their connection invisible. They boarded separately, sat in different sections, didn't exchange a single glance. The first leg, Istanbul, then Warsaw, then Vienna. 3 flights in 18 hours, each chosen not for efficiency but for complexity. The goal wasn't to arrive quickly. The goal was to shake anyone who might be watching. By the time they touched down in Bucharest, the hunt and the war had officially begun. How do you find trust when the whole world looks like a trap? The rain was coming down harder by the time Lissa Vaughn stepped out of Henry Counda Airport. Gray clouds pressed low against the skyline, smearing the city's edges into shadows. Perfect. Rain was cover. It made faces harder to track, cameras harder to read, and tails easier to lose. She moved through the arrivals hall with the practiced ease of someone who'd been running from enemies her entire adult life. Nothing about her pace suggested urgency. Her eyes didn't dart or scan too quickly. The only tell invisible to anyone but those trained to see was the subtle shifting of her reflection in every piece of glass she passed. Surveillance checks. Always surveillance checks. 6 paces behind her, Octavia Wren mirrored the pattern, just as she'd been taught in their short but intense crash course on tradecraft. Same speed, same nonchalance. And yet even now, the young lieutenant couldn't silence the drumbeat in her chest. Just 72 hours ago, she'd been celebrating her commission with her classmates. Now she was a ghost in a foreign city, shadowing one of the most dangerous women alive. They didn't speak. They didn't even look at each other. Their comms link was one-way, secure, and silent. Each knew the other's next 3 moves without needing to ask. That was the Phantom 7-way: predict, anticipate, adapt. The first leg of the plan took them in opposite directions. Lissa exited through the main terminal, hailed a taxi, and disappeared into Bucharest's tangle of side streets. Wren took a bus to the city center, then a tram, then another taxi. The separation wasn't optional. If they were being followed, 2 targets were harder to pin down than one. It was late afternoon when they finally converged in a small, unassuming cafe tucked into a cobblestoned alley in the old district, the kind of place where time seemed to have stopped decades ago. Lissa arrived first, taking a seat in the far corner with her back to the wall and a clear view of every entrance. Wren followed 17 minutes later, slipping inside without acknowledging her. They never spoke. Wren ordered a coffee and took a seat by the window. She sipped it once, then slid a napkin under the cup, a subtle motion that would have meant nothing to anyone else. But when Lissa stood to leave, she cleared Wren's table too, taking the napkin with her. Faint pencil marks on its underside spelled out a set of coordinates and a single letter, T. The rendezvous point. Lissa left on foot, doubling back twice and ducking into a clothing shop to change jackets. It was a standard counter-surveillance maneuver, old school but still effective. Satisfied she was clean, she followed the trail deeper into the city, where narrow streets twisted between centuries-old buildings. The safe house was in one of them, a 5-story block of weathered stone, indistinguishable from the dozens around it. There were no visible cameras, no security signs, no digital footprint. To anyone else, it was a forgotten relic of the Cold War. To Phantom 7, it was home ground. She entered through a service door in the back and took the stairs, always the stairs, to the 5th floor. At a door marked 507, she knocked 3 times, paused, then twice more. A rhythm burned into her memory from missions no one would ever admit existed. A mountain of a man opened the door. He was taller than she remembered, broader too, but the scars along his jawline and the cold, assessing eyes were unmistakable. "Took you long enough," he rumbled. "Talon." The name carried weight. Nikolai Resnik, former Spetsnaz, turned CIA asset, turned Phantom 7 close-quarters specialist. A soldier forged in the brutal crucible of Chechnya, refined in the chaos of black ops, and tempered by a loyalty so absolute that death itself hadn't shaken it. "I had to make sure I wasn't bringing company," she replied, stepping into the apartment. The place was sparse, functional. One glance told her everything she needed to know: 2 exits, windows wide enough for egress, weapons placed strategically within reach. Talon had prepared well. "Your new friend is clean," he said, nodding toward the street below. "Had her under surveillance since she left the airport. No tails." "You still have assets here." "I have assets everywhere." It wasn't a boast. It was a fact. Talon had always been the team's contingency plan, the man who never stopped building networks, even when they were disbanded. Spectre and Wraith. Arriving tomorrow, separate flights, separate routes, layers of security. He gestured to a barely visible tripwire stretched across the window, and a few surprises in case anyone comes knocking. The mention of Tehran, one of their bloodiest missions, hung in the air without explanation. Some ghosts didn't need names. A knock sounded soft, precise, matching Lissa's pattern. Talon moved to answer it, weapon concealed behind his leg. Wren stepped inside, her gaze immediately cataloging the space. Entry points, defensive positions, tripwires, cameras. Her composure surprised Lissa. The lieutenant's situational awareness was sharper than expected, sharper than her experience level should allow. "Lieutenant," Talon greeted with a slight nod, "your father was a good man." Wren blinked. "You knew him." "He saved my life in Kandahar before Phantom 7. He turned to Lissa. She has his eyes, same determination. It wasn't flattery, it was an assessment, and if Talon trusted her, that meant something. "Let's see what we know," Lissa said, moving to the table where several encrypted laptops were already running. The screen lit up with surveillance footage, grainy but clear enough to read patterns. "Dashel and Ara," Talon explained. 48 to 72 hours of surveillance before each hit, then a strike team, 4 operators minimum, military precision, high-end gear. "Government resources," Lissa noted. "But which government?" Wren asked. Lissa and Talon exchanged a glance, impressed. She was asking the right questions now. "That's the problem," Lissa said. "The how is clear, the who and why are." Talon pulled up another screen. "Dashel was investigating something before he died, sent me encrypted fragments. Fragments of redacted reports, partial financial ledgers, and intercepted communications flickered across the monitors. He was following a trail of private security contracts. Most of them trace back to a company called Axiom Strategic." Wren frowned. They recruited heavily from my officer candidate school, offered triple the salary for anyone willing to jump ship. They've been receiving massive payments from a black budget project codenamed Scimitar, Talon added. Billions. And they're building something, an army, highly trained, well-equipped, and completely deniable. A private military force, Lissa said, accountable to no one. But why go after Phantom 7? Wren asked. Talon's expression darkened. Because of this. He brought up one final file. An operational report, redacted to near illegibility. But Lissa didn't need to read the words. She recognized the mission signature immediately. They're recreating Tyrann. The room went silent. Wren looked between them confused. What's Tyrann? Lissa and Talon exchanged a long, heavy glance. The kind of look soldiers share when they're about to exhume something that should have stayed buried. Tyrann was a weapons test, Lissa said finally. A system designed to target individuals based on genetic markers, precision elimination, in theory. In practice, Talon finished grimly, it was a massacre. The air seemed to thicken as the words settled. What was supposed to be a strike against 3 high-value targets killed hundreds of civilians, Lissa continued. The official story was a gas explosion. Our mission was to extract the science team and destroy all evidence of U.S. involvement. And 2 team members didn't make it out, Talon added. The rest of us, we never really came back. Wren's face paled. And Axiom has that weapon now. They've acquired the prototype, Lissa said, and they're planning to use it. Before Wren could respond, a sharp tone pierced the room, a secure message. Talon read it once, jaw tightening. Change of plans. Spectre and Wraith are compromised. Extraction in progress. New rendezvous, Odessa, 36 hours. What about Thorn? Dark, no contact since you left. The implication was clear. Their support network was unraveling. Someone with deep knowledge of Phantom 7's protocols was systematically cutting them off. We move now, Lissa ordered. Talon was already packing. Years apart hadn't dulled their synchronization. Every motion was second nature. Weapons, drives, comms, all packed and gone in under 4 minutes. I have a secondary safe house across the city, Talon said. We regroup there, then plan our route to Odessa. Lieutenant, Lissa said, turning to Wren, contact your former classmates at Axiom, casually. No mention of Scimitar, see what they're working on. And if they get suspicious, then you'll learn how good their counterintelligence really is, Talon said flatly. They exited through a service corridor, emerging 2 blocks away where a sedan waited. Split up, Talon instructed. I'll take the car, you 2 on foot, different routes, rendezvous in 1 hour. Wren nodded. Lissa glanced at her. 3 blocks behind me at all times. If I signal danger, abort and head to the extraction point we discussed. Understood. And then they were gone, into the rain-soaked streets of Bucharest, into the shadows they had once called home. The hunt was tightening, and Phantom 7, once the predators, were now the prey. But predators, when cornered, didn't surrender. They became lethal, unpredictable, unstoppable. Wren followed the instructions perfectly, keeping distance but never losing sight. Her heart pounded, but she forced her breathing steady. 3 days ago, she'd been a soldier in training. Now she was living a war no one would ever acknowledge. Her father's words echoed again. Trust Phantom 7 with your life. Ahead, Lissa turned a corner and vanished from sight. Wren waited 30 seconds, then followed. When she reached the bend, her breath caught. Lissa stood in the middle of the narrow street, hands slightly raised. 3 men surrounded her, civilian clothes hiding the unmistakable discipline of trained operators. One held something pressed against her ribs, a weapon, almost certainly suppressed. Wren froze. Options raced through her mind. Intervention would likely get them both killed. Retreating meant abandoning the one person who could stop this conspiracy. Lissa's head turned slightly. Their eyes met across the distance. Run! The message was silent, absolute, and Ren had seconds to decide whether to obey it. What do you do when the person who could save the world tells you to run? Octavia Wren's breath caught in her throat as rainwater streamed down her cheeks. Three men, no insignia, no visible weapons but posture-screaming military, had surrounded Lissa Vaughn. Their movements were coordinated, precise, too clean for street thugs. This wasn't random. This was a snatch and grab. And Lissa wasn't resisting. Her hands were slightly raised, palms forward, not in surrender but calculation. Every subtle shift of her body spoke of angles, distances, timing. She was mapping them, measuring them, deciding. Wren's instincts screamed at her to help. Every lesson from the academy drilled obedience into her bones. Follow orders. Execute protocol. But this wasn't the academy anymore. And the woman standing in that rain-slicked alley wasn't an instructor, she was Phantom 7. Run! The silent command passed between them in a flicker of eye contact. Lissa's expression didn't waver, but there was something beneath the surface. A warning, yes, but also trust. Trust that Ren would make the choice that mattered. Ren hesitated one heartbeat too long, and in that heartbeat everything changed. One of the men, tall, scar running from temple to jaw, stepped forward, pressing the muzzle of his suppressed weapon against Lissa's ribs. "No sudden moves," he said calmly, his accent Eastern European but polished. "We don't want this to get messy." Lissa's lips barely moved. "Then you've already made your first mistake." Before the man could process the words, her body exploded into motion. The movement was brutal and surgical, every action designed to kill or incapacitate in under a second. Her right elbow drove back into the wrist of the gunman behind her, shattering bone. The weapon clattered to the pavement as she pivoted, heels slamming into the side of the second attacker's knee, a wet crack echoing as he collapsed. The third raised his weapon too slow. Lissa snatched the first man's dropped pistol mid-motion and fired twice. Controlled, precise. One round shattered the gunman's shoulder, the second dropped him with a shot to the thigh. The entire exchange lasted less than 4 seconds. Ren was still frozen at the corner. "Move," Lissa barked, scanning the rooftops. "There's always a second team." Ren snapped back to reality, breaking into a sprint. Together, they retreated down the alley, Lissa moving with lethal grace, Ren struggling to match her pace. The rain hammered harder now, each droplet a tiny percussion against the chaos that followed. A round slammed into the brick inches from Ren's head. Another sparked off a metal railing, suppressed rifles, Overwatch. 2 shooters, elevated positions, Lissa hissed, dragging Ren behind a parked van. "They're not here to capture anymore, they're here to clean up." "Who are they?" Ren asked, breathless. "Not local, too well-trained, too well-equipped." Lissa peeked around the bumper. "Private, likely Axiom." A round pinged off the metal an inch from her cheek. She ducked back, jaw tightening. They needed to move, staying put was suicide. "See that fire escape?" Lissa pointed to a rusted ladder 20 meters down the alley. "When I say go, you run for it and don't stop." "What about you?" "I'll be behind you." Ren didn't like the sound of that. She'd seen enough to know Lissa meant she'd try to be behind her, but if she wasn't, the mission would go on without her. "Go." Ren bolted. Bullets whispered past her ears, thudding into wet brick and asphalt. She reached the ladder and scrambled upward, boots slipping on the rain-slick rungs. Halfway up, she risked a glance back. Lissa was still below, moving with impossible calm under fire. 2 controlled shots dropped one Overwatch shooter, sending his rifle clattering from the rooftop. Another burst from her suppressed pistol forced the second to retreat. "Keep moving," she shouted. Ren hauled herself onto the rooftop, lungs burning. Lissa landed beside her seconds later, rolling smoothly to her feet. They sprinted across the rooftop and leapt to the next building, momentum carrying them toward the safe house Talon had designated. By the time they stopped, they were 4 blocks from the ambush site. Rain still fell in relentless sheets, masking their movements. Wren doubled over, gasping for air. What the hell was that? Standard wet work team, Lissa said, scanning the horizon with her binoculars. 4-man assault, 2 overwatch, likely a 6-man support perimeter. They knew where we'd be, which means our location was compromised before we even landed. The realization was a gut punch. They'd taken every precaution: encrypted comms, layered travel routes, compartmentalized intel, and still, their enemies had been 1 step ahead. Someone wasn't just watching them. Someone was inside their system. "We need to move now," Lissa said, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. "The second team won't be far behind." "Where?" "Talon's secondary site, but we go dark. No electronics, no transmissions. From now on, we operate like we're already burned." They spent the next hour weaving through Bucharest's maze of backstreets, ditching any traceable gear along the way. Phones, trackers, RFID cards, all gone. By the time they reached the rendezvous, they were ghosts again. The secondary safe house was deeper in the city, an abandoned textile factory turned into a fortified stronghold. Talon was waiting inside, rifle in hand, tension etched into every line of his scarred face. "You were followed," he said, "not a question." "They were waiting," Lissa replied. 6 men, Axiom most likely." Talon swore under his breath. "Spectre and Wraith." "Still dark," Lissa said. "If they're alive, they'll make Odessa, if not." Talon nodded grimly. "Then we adapt." They gathered around the operations table, a rough map of Eastern Europe spread across it, dotted with markers and hand-scribbled notes. "Intel from the data drive," Talon said, sliding a USB into a secure terminal. "Surveillance footage, autopsy reports, and this." The screen flickered to life. Satellite images, convoy routes, supply manifests, all pointing to a single facility in eastern Ukraine. "Scimitar," Lissa murmured. "According to Dashiell's notes, Axiom's prototype is being developed here," Talon explained. "Remote facility, off-grid, private contractors and former Intel assets running security." Wren studied the map. "And what happens if they finish it?" Lissa's jaw tightened. "Then they control the most selective weapon ever built. Anyone, anywhere targeted by a genetic profile, political enemies, dissidents, whistleblowers, anyone who poses a threat." "It's a kill switch for humanity," Talon growled. "And they're cleaning up anyone who knows it exists," Lissa said, "starting with us." A heavy silence fell. "Spectre and Wraith were supposed to meet us in Odessa," Talon said. "If they're not there, we assume worst case." Wren swallowed. "What's worst case?" "They're dead," Lissa said flatly, "and Scimitar goes operational without opposition." Wren stared at the map, the weight of it pressing down on her. The scale of what they were facing was bigger than anything she'd imagined, bigger than orders, bigger than the oath she'd sworn. "So what's the plan?" she asked finally. Lissa looked up. "We stop it." "How?" "By doing what Phantom 7 was built to do." Talon's lips curved into a humorless smile. "We go behind the lines, we break what they're building, and if we can't stop it, we bury it." It wasn't bravado. It was resolve. The same resolve that had driven them into impossible missions before, missions the world would never know about. Wren nodded slowly. "Then I'm with you." "Are you sure?" Lissa asked. "Because once we cross that line, there's no coming back. There's no medal, no parade, just a fight we might not win." Wren met her gaze without flinching. "My father died trying to stop something like this. I won't walk away now." For the first time, a hint of something softened Lissa's expression: respect, maybe, or the faintest trace of hope. "Then pack light," she said. "We move at dawn." Dawn came cold and gray. Their route to Odessa would take them through Moldova under false identities. From there, they'd board a freighter bound for the Black Sea coast. No flight manifests, no customs records, no trail. Every step was a gamble, every mile a risk, but they had no choice. Before they departed, Lissa checked her gear one final time, pistol cleaned and oiled, suppressor locked in place, spare magazine secured. Her eyes lingered briefly on the photograph she kept tucked into her pack. 6 faces. A family forged in fire. Only 4 of them still alive. Wren joined her at the door. "Are we ready?" "No," Lissa said, "but we're going anyway." They slipped into the waking city and vanished into its arteries. The hunt for Phantom 7 had entered a new phase, and this time they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the truth, a truth buried so deep beneath layers of lies and black budgets that even speaking it could get them killed. Some wars are fought for nations, others for power. But the most dangerous ones are fought for silence. How do you prepare for a mission you're almost certain you won't return from? The question lingered like a low hum beneath every breath as the city of Bucharest faded into the distance. The rented sedan rolled north toward the Moldovan border under a washed-out sky, rain still clinging stubbornly to the windshield. Lissa Vaughn sat in the passenger seat, silent and motionless, yet her mind was a storm of calculations. Every mile they drove, every turn they took, she cataloged it: escape routes, potential choke points, fallback options. It wasn't paranoia. It was how she'd survived missions that were never supposed to succeed. Beside her, Octavia Wren stared out the window, the blur of farmland and distant villages sliding past. She stopped trying to make conversation hours ago. Lissa wasn't one for words when plans were forming, and this plan was bigger than anything Wren had ever been part of. "This isn't just a mission," Lissa finally said, breaking the silence. "It's a reckoning." Wren turned toward her. "For Tyrion." "For everything," Lissa replied. "For the lies we were told, for the people we lost, for the ghosts we created." She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. Wren had seen the scars, physical and otherwise. Phantom 7's history wasn't a series of glorious victories. It was a string of buried atrocities, classified disasters, and moral compromises wrapped in the language of national security. And now someone had resurrected that history and weaponized it. Hours later, they crossed into Moldova under forged diplomatic papers, their new identities buried under layers of falsified travel logs and clearance codes. From there, they boarded a cargo truck bound for the Black Sea port of Giurgiulesti, where a freighter waited under a false registry. The ship, the Seraphine, was a rust-streaked relic flying a Panamanian flag, but it was exactly what they needed: anonymous, unremarkable, invisible. 3 days to Odessa, the captain told them in broken English. "We keep to old shipping lanes, no questions asked." "Good," Lissa said, slipping an envelope across the table. "And if anyone does start asking questions?" The captain counted the money without looking up. "They won't." The Seraphine rumbled to life just before dawn, its engines pushing them slowly out into the open sea. The Black Sea stretched endless and gray before them, waves rolling like the slow, heavy breath of a sleeping giant. Wren stood at the railing that night, staring into the darkness. The weight of everything pressed against her chest: the mission, the stakes, the danger. But more than anything, it was the enormity of what they were trying to stop. "If they deploy Scimitar," she asked quietly, "how many people could they kill?" Lissa joined her at the railing, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Not kill, erase." Wren frowned. "What's the difference?" "Death leaves a record. Scimitar doesn't," Lissa said softly. "It's precision on a scale we never should have attempted. One by one, entire movements could vanish without anyone knowing they were targeted. People would just stop existing." The words hung heavy in the sea air. "Is that what Tyrion was supposed to be?" Wren asked. Lissa didn't answer for a long time. When she did, her voice was quieter than the waves. Tyrion was supposed to prove we could end wars without armies. Just 3 names on a list. No collateral, no headlines. But technology like that doesn't care about intentions. It doesn't care about ethics. Once it exists, someone will use it for the worst reason possible. And now Axiom has it. And they're cleaning the slate of anyone who remembers how it works. Ren swallowed, including you. Lissa turned to face her, especially me. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the groan of the ship and the crash of distant waves. For the first time, Ren understood the depth of what this mission meant to Lissa. It wasn't about redemption or revenge. It was about finishing something that had started long before either of them had a choice. On the third night, just before dawn, the Seraphine slipped quietly into a private dock on the outskirts of Odessa. The port was mostly abandoned, a relic of Soviet-era shipping lanes, but that was why it was perfect. No customs, no eyes, no questions. Talon was waiting near a stack of rusting containers, a cigarette glowing faintly between his fingers. He stamped it out as they approached. "Good to see you both alive," he said gruffly. "Alive is relative," Lissa replied. "Any word from Spectre or Wraith?" Talon shook his head. "Nothing. Either they're deep under or they're gone." Lissa's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. The silence was louder than any words could have been. They moved quickly, loading gear into a pair of battered utility vans. Weapons, comms kits, burner phones, encrypted drives, everything they would need for the operation ahead. "Here, what we know," Talon said as they drove north toward the Ukrainian interior. "The Scimitar site is in a decommissioned radar station about 40 kilometers outside Mykolaiv. Axiom has converted it into a secure facility. 3 perimeter fences, heavy drone presence, internal security estimated at 30 to 50 contractors, all ex-special forces." "Entry points?" Lissa asked. 2, main gate heavily guarded. Service tunnel less so, but it's protected by biometric locks and motion sensors. "And the prototype?" Talon slid a satellite photo across the dashboard. A single building stood at the center of the compound, stark, utilitarian, surrounded by reinforced fencing. "Here," he said, "level 3 underground." "How soon until they deploy it?" "Unknown," Talon admitted, "but based on logistics traffic they're close, weeks, maybe days." Lissa stared at the photo, her mind already racing through scenarios. Assault plans, entry strategies, contingency routes. The variables were infinite, the margin for error non-existent. "Options?" Talon asked. "We go in before they're ready," Lissa said. "Hit the site before they finalize the prototype. Destroy everything. And if we can't, then we make sure no one ever uses it." Ren shifted uncomfortably. "Meaning?" "Meaning we level the site," Lissa said coldly. "Scorched earth." The weight of her words settled like lead in the van. There was no bravado in them, only grim necessity. If they couldn't capture Scimitar, they would bury it, and themselves if necessary. They reached the staging site, an abandoned farmhouse miles from the nearest village, just before dusk. It was the kind of place that didn't exist on maps anymore, forgotten by everyone except those who needed it to stay that way. Inside, they began final preparations. Weapons were cleaned and loaded, communications checked and encrypted, routes were drawn and redrawn on weathered maps. Spectre would have had the comms grid hacked by now, Talon muttered, frustration creeping into his voice. "Spectre isn't here," Lissa said evenly. "We adapt." Ren examined the schematics pinned to the wall. "We're 3 people going up against 50, she said. "How does this even work?" "It works," Lissa replied, "because they'll never see us coming." Her confidence wasn't arrogance, it was experience. Phantom 7 had always thrived in the shadows. They didn't win with numbers. They won by being the ghost no one saw until it was too late. That night, as darkness fell across the Ukrainian countryside, the three of them sat around a single dim lantern. No one spoke for a long time. The weight of the mission pressed against them, heavy and inevitable. Finally, Talon broke the silence. "You ever think about what happens if we fail?" Lissa stared into the darkness. "Every day. And then we make sure no one else ever has to." Ren's gaze lingered on her, trying to decipher the woman behind the legend. There was something almost serene in Lissa's calm, not resignation, but acceptance. She had made peace with the idea that she might not walk away from this. Ren hadn't, not yet. "Why did you come back?" Ren asked quietly. "After Tyrion, after everything." Lissa looked up, her expression unreadable. "Because someone has to finish it." She didn't say what it was. She didn't need to. The mission wasn't just about Scimitar. It was about unfinished business, for the team, for the dead, for the ghosts they carried with them. At 400, they moved out. The drive to the facility was silent. The closer they got, the heavier the air felt, charged with a tension that hummed just beneath the surface. By the time they reached the outer perimeter, the world beyond the van's windows was a void of darkness and cold. Lissa checked her weapon one last time. Talon adjusted the suppressor on his rifle. Ren, hands trembling only slightly, secured her sidearm. "This is it," Lissa said. "Once we cross this fence, there's no going back." Ren nodded. "Then let's finish it." They slipped into the night, three shadows moving as one. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, inside that fortified compound, the future of war and the weight of their past waited. What does it feel like to walk into hell, not because you want to, but because no one else will? The rain had stopped hours before, leaving the air cold and heavy with the scent of wet earth. Somewhere beyond the tree line, past 3 layers of fencing, biometric scanners and armed patrols, the future of warfare pulsed in the dark. A weapon never meant to exist, now one heartbeat away from being unleashed. Lissa Vaughn crouched in the tall grass, night vision lenses painting the world in shades of green. Her pulse was steady, her breath controlled. Every fiber of her being was tuned to the task ahead. There was no room for fear now. Fear was for people who had options. Beside her, Talon adjusted the suppressor on his rifle, his massive frame impossibly still. He had been through hundreds of operations like this, but even he looked different tonight. Older, heavier, a man who knew that one wrong step here would end more than just their lives. Octavia Ren knelt a few meters behind them, triple-checking the charge on her sidearm. Her hands trembled only slightly this time. She was scared, but she was here, and that mattered more than anything. "Status," Lissa whispered. "Outer perimeter, 4 guards on rotation, 30-second pattern," Talon replied. "South fence blind spot holds for 12 seconds every cycle. Thermals. 2 cameras on the west side. Spectre would have disabled them by now." A grim pause. "We'll have to improvise." Improvisation, Phantom 7's unofficial motto. Lissa scanned the compound one last time, memorizing the movements of every light and patrol. The facility itself was a bastardized hybrid of old Soviet infrastructure and cutting-edge security, all concrete and steel on the surface, but humming with a deeper, darker purpose beneath. "On my mark," she said. They moved like shadows, low and silent. Every step was measured, every pause calculated. When the patrol turned, they advanced. When the cameras rotated, they froze. 12 seconds was a lifetime in this world, and they used every heartbeat of it. At the fence line, Talon clipped a small device to the chain link. The pulse emitter buzzed faintly, sending a wave of electromagnetic interference through the sensor grid. "Window open," he muttered. They slipped through one by one. No alarms, no lights, just the soft whisper of boots on damp soil. The second fence was trickier, electrified and pressure-sensitive. Lissa removed a small cutting tool from her kit, slicing through a section of wire with surgical precision, while Talon wedged ceramic wedges under the posts to neutralize the pressure plate. 2 minutes before the current resets, Talon warned. "Plenty," Lissa replied. They were inside. The compound loomed ahead, low buildings scattered around a central communications tower, floodlights cutting harsh cones through the darkness. Beyond them, a concrete hatch led to the subterranean levels where the scimitar prototype was housed. That was their target. But first, they had to get there. "South Patrol incoming," Wren whispered, watching through her scope. Lissa held up a hand. They flattened against the ground as two guards passed just meters away, their boots crunching on gravel. One stopped, turning his head as if sensing something. Wren held her breath, the second stretched. Then he shrugged and kept walking. They moved again, cutting across the open ground and slipping behind a maintenance shed. Lissa checked her watch. Every part of the plan was running late, but lateness was preferable to detection. "Service tunnel entrance ahead," Talon said, pointing toward a concrete bunker half hidden by a supply truck. "Biometric lock. Can you spoof it?" "Can't spoof," Lissa replied, "but we can trick it." She knelt by the panel and pulled a small device from her pack, a miniature sensor overlay Spectre had designed years ago. It was old, but it still worked. Within seconds, the device mapped the internal wiring of the lock, isolating the signal pattern it needed. "Give me 60 seconds. 60 seconds felt like an eternity under a floodlight. Every second was a new risk, a patrol, a camera sweep, a random guard deciding to smoke a cigarette in the wrong place. Wren's hand hovered near her weapon, heart hammering. Then click, the lock disengaged. "Go." The tunnel was narrow and steep, a relic of the Cold War built for maintenance crews who'd long since vanished. The air was colder here, tinged with the sterile scent of recycled filtration systems. They moved in silence. No talking, no unnecessary light, only the soft scuff of boots and the steady rhythm of breathing. At the bottom, the tunnel split into 3 paths. Lissa paused, orienting herself with the schematic Talon had memorized. "Left goes to the generator, right to storage, middle is our way down." They took the middle. It wasn't long before they hit their first obstacle, a pair of guards stationed outside a reinforced security door. Their body language was relaxed, casual. They didn't know anyone could be down here. Talon raised 3 fingers. On one he and Lissa moved, 2 suppressed shots, 2 bodies dropping silently to the floor. Wren stared for a heartbeat too long. It wasn't her first time seeing death, but this was different. Colder, cleaner. "Eyes forward, Lieutenant," Lissa said quietly. "We're just getting started." Beyond the door, the facility opened up into a maze of concrete corridors and reinforced steel doors. Security cameras dotted the ceilings. Sensors blinked from recess panels. Every corner felt like it could hide a death sentence. "Contact," Talon whispered, freezing them in place. A patrol of 4 rounded the corner ahead. Lissa signaled them to hold, counting silently as they passed. 1, 2, 3. On 4 she struck. She moved faster than Wren's eyes could track, a blur of silent violence. Her knife slipped between the ribs of the rearmost guard, silencing his cry before it began. Talon's suppressed rifle took the second. The third spun in confusion, and Wren, acting on instinct, fired twice, catching him center mass. The fourth bolted for the alarm panel. Lissa's pistol barked once. He dropped. "Nice shooting," Talon grunted. Wren's hands shook slightly as she lowered the weapon. "I didn't think, I just—" "That's the point," Lissa said. "Thinking gets you killed." They dragged the bodies into a storage alcove and pressed on. With every step deeper into the facility, the air grew colder and the stakes higher. Finally, they reached it. The scimitar chamber. A heavy blast door sealed the entrance, flanked by biometric readers and guarded by 2 more sentries. Through the narrow observation slit, Ren glimpsed the interior, banks of servers humming with power, technicians in lab coats moving between consoles, and at the center, a cylindrical chamber glowing faintly blue. "That's it," Talon whispered, "the core." "The prototype," Lissa corrected, "and it's farther along than we thought." They didn't have time to marvel, they had to move. "Plan?" Talon asked. "We neutralize the guards, breach the chamber, plant charges on the data cores and the targeting array. Everything burns." "And the scientists?" Ren asked softly. Lissa's expression hardened. They made their choice. The words cut deeper than Ren expected. Somewhere beneath the hardened operative, the woman still existed, the one who'd once believed in saving lives, not ending them. But that woman didn't get missions like this done. They moved. Talon dropped the first guard with a suppressed round to the chest. Lissa took the second with a blade across the throat. No alarms, no time lost. Lissa knelt at the blast door, bypassing the secondary lock with a tool kit she hadn't used in years. Her hands didn't shake. They never did. Even now, with the weight of the world pressing down, her focus was unbreakable. 30 seconds, she said. Ren watched her work and realized for the first time that this was what Phantom 7 really was. Not myth, not legend, just people. People who carried the unbearable weight of decisions no one else was willing to make. The door hissed open. Chaos erupted. Technicians screamed as smoke grenades filled the chamber. Talon moved first, his rifle cutting down 2 armed security personnel before they could react. Lissa vaulted over a console, firing with surgical precision. Ren followed, heart pounding, her shots wild but effective. "Charges," Lissa shouted. Ren yanked the shaped charges from her pack, slapping them onto the glowing cylinder of the scimitar core. Talon planted 2 more on the main server bank. The timers blinked to life, 6 minutes and counting. "Move," Lissa barked. "We're done here." They were halfway to the exit when the first alarm blared. Red lights bathed the corridor. Automated shutters slammed down over the exits. "They know we're here," Talon growled. "They always did," Lissa said. Gunfire erupted from both ends of the hallway. Axiom's rapid response teams had arrived, and they were ready. The corridor became a kill box. Bullets shredded the walls around them, sparks raining from shattered lights. "Cover fire," Lissa yelled, diving behind an overturned console. Ren and Talon returned fire, each shot precise, deliberate. 2 assailants dropped. 3 more took their place. The odds were shifting fast and not in their favor. "Alternate exit," Talon shouted. "Blocked," Lissa snapped. "We're pinned." "Then we hold until detonation." But 6 minutes was a lifetime in a firefight. Ren felt panic claw at her throat. This was it. This was how they died in a steel corridor beneath foreign soil, erased like the ghosts they were. And then she saw Lissa, calm, calculating, utterly unafraid. "We're not dying here," she said. "Not today." And for the first time, Ren believed her. Lissa glanced at the detonator timer, 3:42 remaining. Long enough to die a dozen times. Too long to wait. "Change of plan," she muttered, grabbing a comm device from her vest. "Talon, fall back to the ventilation shaft on my mark. Ren, you're with me." "Where are you going?" "Buying us 3 minutes." Before Ren could argue, Lissa was gone, sprinting toward the advancing Axiom team with the reckless precision of someone who had nothing left to lose. How far are you willing to go, not to win, but to make sure evil does? The hallway was a storm of chaos. Bullets screamed through the air, ricocheting off steel bulkheads, shattering fluorescent lights, filling the corridor with sparks and smoke. The world had narrowed to sound and instinct, the rapid crack of suppressed rifles, the thud of boots closing in, the hiss of Lissa Vaughn's breath as she sprinted toward the impossible. She moved with brutal precision, not wasting a single movement. 1 second she was sliding across the floor, firing controlled bursts into the legs of the advancing Axiom team. The next, she was vaulting over a fallen technician, knife flashing in a deadly arc that silenced a man before he could shout. This wasn't about killing, it was about time. Every second she bought meant Ren and Talon had a chance to escape, to finish the mission, to live. It wasn't a heroic decision. It was math, and Lissa had always been very good at math. 3 minutes, Talon shouted over comms, voice crackling with static. Make them count, Lissa hissed back. The enemy was adapting. They were disciplined, not panicking, not rushing. They advanced tactically, using cover, coordinating their fire. Whoever they weren't standard contractors. These were operators, possibly former Tier 1, possibly worse. A burst of fire tore through the wall inches from her head, showering her with sparks. Lissa dropped low, rolled behind a support pillar and returned fire. 2 men fell. A third went down screaming, clutching a shredded shoulder. Then silence. Too quiet. She felt it before she saw it, the sudden shift in the air, the weight of eyes on her from an angle she hadn't accounted for. Lissa spun, but too late. A figure stepped out from the shadows behind her, the cold barrel of a suppressed weapon pressing against the back of her skull. Don't, a voice said, male, deep, familiar. Lissa froze, not from fear but recognition. The man stepped into the flickering light, lowering his weapon just enough for her to see his face. Her breath caught. Spectre. The name slipped from her lips like a memory. The man she had once trusted with her life, their comms specialist, their ghost in the machine, the one who had been compromised and gone dark weeks ago, stood before her now. Alive, armed, and wearing Axiom colors. Hello, Phantom, Spectre said, voice calm, almost regretful. I was hoping we wouldn't have to do this. Her finger tightened on the trigger. You sold us out. I saved us, he replied. Do you have any idea what they offered, what they're building here? It's bigger than Scimitar, bigger than Phantom 7, bigger than any of us. Bigger than the people you're going to erase, she spat. He sighed, always the idealist, always thinking you could save the world by breaking it. Where Wraith, she asked. Something flickered in his eyes, guilt. She didn't agree with the plan. Rage surged in her chest. You killed her. She gave me no choice. The words hit like a sledgehammer. For a moment, the hallway around her blurred, the gunfire, the smoke, the screams fatting beneath the weight of betrayal. Wraith, the team's infiltrator, the woman who had pulled Lissa out of a burning compound in Tehran, gone, because the man they'd trusted had traded loyalty for survival. Why, she whispered. Because I'm tired, Spectre said. We've been fighting ghosts for decades, and for what? So another war can start. Another program can replace the last. At least this time we can control how the game is played. Lissa's jaw tightened. You're not controlling anything, you're a pawn. Maybe, he said softly, but at least I'll be a living pawn. The muzzle pressed harder against her skull. Drop the weapon. Surrender. They'll keep you alive. They want you alive. Why? Because Phantom 7 isn't a threat they want to eliminate, he said. It's one they want to own. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Rainwater from a leaking pipe dripped steadily onto the floor, each drop punctuating the silence. Then Lissa did something Spectre didn't expect. She smiled. It was a small, cold smile, the kind she wore on operations that had already gone too far to turn back. You should know better, she whispered. The move was lightning. She dropped to her knees, twisting beneath his aim, the suppressed round ripping through empty air where her head had been. In the same breath, she drove her elbow into his wrist, sending his weapon clattering across the floor. Spectre cursed, drawing a knife from his belt, but Lissa was faster. She kicked his legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the ground. The knife skittered away. For a second they stared at each other, predator and betrayer, old friends turned enemies. Then they collided. The fight was vicious, close quarters, personal. Spectre was skilled, he always had been, but Lissa was something else entirely. Every strike she landed carried years of betrayal and loss behind it. Every block was fueled by ghosts. "You killed Wraith," she shouted, slamming her fist into his jaw. "She left me no choice," he snarled, throwing her off and driving a knee into her ribs. "She trusted you." She was naive. They crashed into a console, sparks erupting as wires tore free. A screen shattered. Lissa caught him by the collar and slammed his head against the metal frame once, twice. He staggered, dazed, blood streaking down his temple. "She was family," Lissa hissed, "and you sold her for a paycheck." Spectre laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Family? Phantom 7 was never a family. We were tools, and tools get discarded." "Then let's make sure this one still has an edge." The final blow was swift and brutal. Her knife plunged into his shoulder, dropping him to his knees with a cry of pain. Lissa stepped back, breath ragged, eyes cold. "Where's the failsafe?" she demanded. "What failsafe?" "Don't play dumb. Scimitar has a remote override. Where is it?" Spectre coughed, blood flecking his lips. "You'll never make it out alive." That wasn't the question. His eyes flicked toward a reinforced door at the far end of the chamber. That was all she needed. She grabbed his dropped weapon and sprinted toward it. Behind her, Spectre's voice echoed through the chaos. "You can't stop it, Phantom. It's already begun." She didn't look back. Meanwhile, Talon and Ren were pinned at the ventilation shaft. The corridor was a slaughterhouse, walls riddled with bullet holes, smoke choking the air, alarms howling overhead. 2 minutes, Ren shouted over the noise. "Too long," Talon barked, firing a burst down the hallway. "We won't last that long." "Where'd Lissa?" "Buying us time." Ren's throat tightened. She wanted to believe Lissa would return, but deep down she knew what that meant. People like Lissa didn't buy time for themselves. They bought it for everyone else. A grenade clattered across the floor. Talon kicked it back before it could detonate, the explosion rocking the corridor and sending a rain of debris down on them. "Move," he shouted. "We can't hold." 3-2, Ren checked the timer on the detonator. 1. A distant rumble shook the ground. The first charge detonated, ripping through the scimitar core. Alarms shifted pitch, klaxons screaming as systems went offline. The lights flickered, then died. "Time up," Talon growled. "Now we run." Lissa reached the reinforced door and blasted the lock panel with 3 precise shots. It hissed open to reveal a small, sterile room lined with server racks and a single control terminal. On the screen, a progress bar ticked upward. Scimitar calibration 94%. Spectre hadn't been lying. The weapon was almost operational. "Not today," she muttered. She moved to the terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard. Her goal wasn't to shut it down, it was too late for that. Instead, she planted a virus in the control system, a failsafe that would corrupt the targeting sequence beyond recovery. "Override accepted," the screen blinked. "System failure imminent." A voice echoed behind her. "Step away from the console." She turned slowly. A man stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 heavily armed guards. He was older, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and entirely out of place in a combat zone. "Director Hale," Lissa said, recognizing him instantly. "The founder of Axiom Strategic, the architect of Scimitar, the ghost behind the curtain." "I wondered how long it would take before you showed up," Hale said calmly. "You always were the stubborn one." "You built a genocide machine," she said coldly. "I built a deterrent," he corrected. "A way to end wars before they start, a way to hold the powerful accountable. By murdering people who disagree with you. By removing those who destabilize the world," he said simply. "A clean solution, surgical, necessary." "There's nothing clean about this," she spat, "and you know it." He sighed. "You're a relic, Phantom. a soldier clinging to obsolete morality. The future belongs to those willing to make hard choices. Funny, she said, raising her weapon. So does the past. She fired. The shot missed Hale by inches, shattering the control panel behind him. The room plunged into darkness as systems short-circuited, sparks arcing across the walls. The guards opened fire. Lissa dove for cover, returning fire in controlled bursts. One guard went down. The second pressed forward. Her magazine clicked empty. "End of the line," Hale said, stepping over the fallen guard. "Not quite." Lissa hurled a fragmentation charge at the base of the control core. Hale's eyes widened. "You wouldn't. Watch me." The explosion tore through the room, throwing Lissa backward. Heat slammed into her chest, shards of metal slicing through her jacket. The world spun, ears ringing, vision blurring. Somewhere in the chaos, she heard Hale shouting orders, then silence. Blackness swallowed everything. Do heroes ever really win, or do they just lose more slowly than the rest? Lissa Vaughn's first sensation was sound, a low, rhythmic beeping somewhere to her left, the soft hiss of oxygen, distant, muffled voices she couldn't place. Then came pain, sharp, merciless, radiating from every inch of her body. Her chest felt like it had been split in half. Her hands wouldn't move. Her ribs screamed with every breath. She was alive somehow. A blurry ceiling swam into view above her. White, sterile, medical. The faint scent of antiseptic burned her nose. "Not dead, not yet. Don't move." The voice was steady, firm, familiar. Lissa blinked through the haze until the figure beside her bed came into focus. "Ren." The younger woman's face was bruised, bandaged, but her eyes burned with something fierce and unrelenting. Relief, anger, gratitude, all of it mixed into one. "Welcome back," Ren said, voice trembling despite her best effort to keep it calm. "You've been out for 40 hours. Where?" "Safe house, Odessa." Lissa's lips were dry, her voice a rasp. "Talon." Ren's eyes dropped. He didn't make it. The room spun. Lissa closed her eyes and let the silence swallow her. Talon, her anchor, her shield, the one man who had never once hesitated when she gave an order, gone. Killed holding the ventilation shaft long enough for the charges to blow. She had known the odds, they all had, but knowing never softened the blow. "What about Scimitar?" she asked after a long silence. Ren's voice steadied. "Destroyed, the core, the targeting servers, everything. The explosion took out half the underground facility." "And Hale?" Ren hesitated. "We don't know. The body count's incomplete. He's either buried under 50 tons of concrete or he slipped out before the blast." Lissa let out a bitter laugh, more a cough than anything. "Of course." "Spectre." "Captured," Ren said. "Barely. He was trying to crawl out through the sub-level maintenance shaft when the response team got him. He's in a black site now. No name, no trial." "Good." They sat in silence for a long time, the weight of everything they'd lost pressing down on them. It was over. At least the mission was. Scimitar was gone. The weapon that could have rewritten warfare had been buried before it could breathe, but victory tasted like ash. "Why did you do it?" Ren asked suddenly. Lissa turned her head toward her. "Do what?" "Stay behind, take on Spectre, go after the override. You could have run, we could have made it out together." Lissa stared at the ceiling, searching for an answer that didn't sound like a cliché. Finally, she exhaled slowly. "Because someone had to," she said. "And because if I didn't, then everything we'd done, everything we'd sacrificed would have meant nothing." Ren swallowed hard. "You always knew you weren't coming back, didn't you?" "I suspected." "Then why bring me?" A faint, pained smile touched Lissa's lips. "Because someone has to remember." 2 weeks later, the world had already moved on. Officially, the explosion at the Mykolaiv facility was attributed to a chemical accident at a private research site. No one mentioned Axiom. No one mentioned Scimitar. The media cycle turned, the headlines shifted, and the public never knew how close they had come to waking up in a very different world. But in the shadows, those who did know were paying attention. Phantom 7's files, long thought buried, began surfacing in encrypted leaks. The names of Axiom's board members appeared on classified watch lists. Politicians whispered of rogue operations and containment failures. And somewhere, in a nameless hospital room under armed guard, Lissa Vaughn lay staring out a rain-streaked window, wondering if it had been enough. Wren visited every day. She brought updates, coffee, sometimes just silence. They didn't talk about Talon or Wraith. They didn't talk about the faces that still haunted their dreams. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, Wren would catch Lissa staring at nothing, and she knew those ghosts weren't gone. They never would be. "Command offered me a reassignment," Wren said one morning, breaking the silence. "To where?" "Counterproliferation Unit. They want me to help track down any remnants of Scimitar tech." Lissa nodded slightly. "Good work, you should take it." "They also asked about you." "Of course they did. They want to debrief you, declassify parts of Phantom 7, maybe even offer a deal." "Let me guess," Lissa said dryly. "Immunity for cooperation." "Something like that." Lissa looked back out the window. "I'm not interested." Wren sighed. "I figured you'd say that." "Because you know me." "Because I learned from you," Wren said softly. For the first time, Lissa turned fully toward her. There was pride in her eyes, quiet, restrained, but real. "You did good, Lieutenant." "Did we?" Wren asked. "Because sometimes it doesn't feel like it." Lissa's gaze drifted to the rain. "Good isn't about how it feels. It's about what it changes." 3 months later, a package arrived at an unmarked intelligence facility in Northern Virginia. No return address. No fingerprints. Inside was a small encrypted drive and a single piece of paper with 5 words written in neat, deliberate handwriting. Phantom 7 was never finished. The drive contained terabytes of data, financial ledgers, communications logs, prototype schematics. Axiom's entire hidden empire laid bare. No one ever figured out how it had been acquired. Some suspected an insider. Others whispered that Lissa Vaughn herself had walked into Axiom's data center and ghosted out with their secrets. Whatever the truth, the effect was seismic. Investigations opened on 3 continents. Shell corporations dissolved overnight. Sanctions were drafted. Arrests were made. And still, the public knew nothing. One cold morning, nearly a year after Mykolaiv, Wren stood alone at a small military cemetery just outside Arlington. The air was crisp, the grass damp with dew. A single headstone stood before her, no name, no rank, no branch. Just a single phrase etched into the stone. "For those who were never meant to exist." It was a memorial for the unacknowledged, the men and women who had fought wars no one would ever admit happened. Talon, Wraith, the others whose stories had ended far from home, without medals or monuments. Wren placed a small silver coin at the base of the stone, the same coin Lissa had given her before the mission. "For luck," Lissa had said. It hadn't been luck that got them home. It had been sacrifice. She turned as footsteps approached behind her. Lissa walked slowly toward her, still favoring her left side, still healing. She wore no uniform, no insignia, just a plain gray coat and the same distant look in her eyes. "You shouldn't be here," Wren said quietly. "Neither should you." They stood side by side in silence. "Do you ever think it was worth it?" Wren asked. Lissa didn't answer right away. She stared at the nameless grave, her jaw tight, her breath slow. "I think," she said finally, "that if we hadn't done it, someone else would have had to. And maybe they wouldn't have made it this far." "That's not an answer." "No," Lissa admitted, "but it's the truth." They watched as the sun began to rise, pale light creeping across the horizon. It was quiet here, too quiet for the noise that still lived in their heads. "Phantom 7 is gone," Ren said softly. Lissa shook her head. Phantom 7 was never a unit, it was an idea, and ideas don't die. She looked at Ren, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corner of her lips. "They evolve." 2 weeks later, in a warehouse deep in the outskirts of Warsaw, 6 people gathered around a table covered in blueprints and satellite photos. None wore uniforms. None had names. But every single one of them had been touched by the same machine, betrayed by it, scarred by it, hunted by it. At the head of the table, Lissa Vaughn traced a red line across a photo of a remote desert facility. "Intel says they're rebuilding," she said quietly. "Different project name, different funding streams, same purpose." Ren, seated beside her, leaned forward. "Then we finish what we started." Lissa nodded once. "We do this off the books, no command, no oversight, no flags." "And if it kills us?" one of the others asked. Lissa's eyes met his, steady and unflinching. "Then it kills us, but if we walk away it kills everyone else." No one spoke after that. They didn't need to. The mission wasn't over. It never would be. As long as there were people who believed that power meant control, there would have to be others willing to fight in the dark, unseen, uncredited, unremembered. And somewhere in the silence between heartbeats, the legend lived on. They say ghosts don't bleed. They say they don't feel. They say they move through the world untouched, unburdened by the weight of the things they've done. They're wrong. Ghosts carry the heaviest burdens of all. And sometimes, if the world is very lucky, those ghosts walk among us. They wear no medals. They ask for no thanks. They don't speak of what they've seen or what they've lost. They just keep moving, keep fighting, keep acting. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.